Seoul, South Korea. The air buzzed with the sound of traffic and tourists, but Vivian Knight blocked it all out. Her world was in the melody. She stood near the entrance of a subway station in Hongdae, her saxophone pressed against her lips, her fingers moving like second nature. She wasn't here for attention. She was here to breathe. The music poured out of her, sultry, rich, and unapologetic. It wasn't clean. It wasn't pretty. It was true. Her truth. Her mother's dream. Her own rebellion against every stage she'd never been allowed to stand on. Then the energy shifted. She didn't stop playing, but her eyes lifted. A man, mid-40s, white, loud, drunk, was approaching from the crowd. She could feel the sneer before he opened his mouth. "Didn't know they let Americans busk over here," he slurred. "Bet you make more money playing the race card." The crowd tensed. A few passersby slowed. Someone pulled out a phone. Vivian paused mid-note. "Excuse me?" she asked coolly, lowering her sax. The man grinned. "Relax. It's a compliment. You're better than I expected. Not usually into jazz, but I guess it's in your blood, right?" Her face didn't move. "Walk away." He took a step closer. "You always this rude when someone throws you a bone?" "No," she said flatly. "Just when the bone's still attached to the dog." Gasps. Someone stifled a laugh. He moved fast, raising his voice. "Who the hell do you think you—" "That's enough." The voice that cut through the tension was low, cold, controlled. The man froze mid-step. Everyone turned. Minoru Takeda stood at the edge of the crowd, dressed in a black cashmere coat and charcoal scarf, his expression unreadable. He wasn't tall in an obvious way, but he had the kind of presence that made space bend around him. He stepped forward slowly, every inch of him composed and lethal. "You're embarrassing yourself," Minoru said in perfect English, "and you're one word away from being on every Korean news station by morning." The drunk man blinked. "What's it to you?" Minoru didn't answer with words. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen once. Security footage from his own building, where the man had been seen earlier, flickered into view. "Your name is Christopher Wyatt. You're here on business. And unless you want the rest of your career destroyed by one clip, you'll walk away. Now." Silence. Then the man turned and stumbled off, red-faced and muttering. The crowd applauded. Vivian didn't. She locked eyes with Minoru. There was something in his face. Not pride, not performance. A storm. He nodded slightly, then turned and disappeared. It hit the internet like a tidal wave. Someone had recorded the entire thing. By nightfall, the headline read, "Black musician saved from racist attack by Japanese CEO." By morning, it had 12 million views. Vivian Knight was trending worldwide, but no one called to ask how she felt. They just wanted her story, packaged, polished, and ready to sell. 40 floors above Seoul, Minoru Takeda stood in front of a wall of glass, watching the city stretch out like a grid of decisions. He hadn't meant to stop that day. He just reacted. But now, his publicist burst in with shaking hands and a tablet. "Minoru, this could save you." He raised an eyebrow. "People love her," the woman breathed. "The way she stood her ground, the way you handled it. You're a hero again. We can fix the narrative. We just need her." Minoru's voice was quiet. "What are you suggesting?" "A deal. 6 months, public appearances, red carpets, give her a cause, give you a conscience. Everyone wins." He looked away. "No scripts." "She doesn't need a script, just a stage." Vivian opened the door of the penthouse suite with every intention of saying no. But the man who met her inside wasn't the one from the headlines. He looked tired, paler than the video showed, still sharp, still unreadable. "Ms. Knight?" he said, standing. "Thank you for coming." "I didn't come for pleasantries," she said, arms folded. Let's talk about the offer. He gestured to a chair. You'll be compensated. $5 million US, paid in installments. Half now, half after the agreement ends. She didn't sit. For what exactly? Be my girlfriend. In public. Nothing physical. Nothing private. Just present. Her jaw clenched. And if I refuse? He didn't blink. You won't. Vivian raised her chin. You don't know me. No, he said. But I know the school you've been trying to fund for years. The one named after your mother. That stopped her. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, photos of the property she toured. A blueprint. Her GoFundMe that never reached 12%. You had me researched, she whispered. No, he said. I had you respected. Silence. Thick. Tense. Unflinching. She stepped forward, picked up the folder, and flipped through the documents like they were weapons. Because in her hands, they were. Finally, she met his eyes. I know what I'm being used for, she said, voice sharp, but I refuse to let it be one-sided. Minoru didn't smile, but something in his eyes shifted. Respect. She signed the contract, not with fear, with fire. And as she stepped into the elevator, press already buzzing outside, cameras waiting to devour her, Vivian whispered to herself, they can have my image, but not my soul. The first thing they took was her name. Her emails became Ms. Knight. Please review wardrobe lookbook A, B, or C. Her hair became branding consideration. Her voice became a curated caption. And her silence? They called it elegance. Vivian stood in front of the mirror in the Takeda penthouse dressing suite, staring at her reflection with the kind of deadpan expression she used to reserve for schoolyard bullies. The dress was sleek, blood red, designer. She looked like a statement, not a person. Behind her, two stylists bickered in Korean about lip color. Vivian adjusted the neckline, jaw tight. If you're wondering, she said dryly, my blood type is O. I prefer jazz over K-pop, and I'm allergic to being handled. The stylist froze, then nervously laughed. Minoru's assistant entered without knocking, tablet in hand. We're due at the press panel in 20 minutes. Vivian turned, arms folded. And am I allowed to speak this time, or just stand beside your boss and blink on cue? The assistant hesitated. There's a script, but you may deviate slightly, as long as it's warm. Vivian blinked. Warm like cocoa? Or warm like a hot comb on Sunday morning? The assistant flushed and backed out. Vivian didn't smile. The panel was a sanitized lie. Lights, applause, scripted laughter, 3 chairs, Minoru in his immaculately tailored charcoal suit, Vivian in her fire-red gown, and the moderator, a polished woman with teeth too white to be trusted. The questions were soft at first, controlled. Then came the inevitable. So Vivian, what drew you to Mr. Takeda? The PR script sat on her lap like a loaded gun. The approved answer, Minoru and I connected on our shared commitment to innovation and empowerment. Vivian's fingers rested on the paper. She didn't look at it. She looked straight into the camera lens. What drew me to Minoru? She echoed. Nothing. The room went still. Minoru's head turned toward her slowly. She kept going. I didn't grow up dreaming of dating CEOs. I grew up watching my mother work 2 jobs to teach music in basements because Black kids like me didn't get access to violins. I didn't want to be part of someone's image rehab. I wanted to build something real. But the world only listens when someone powerful stands beside you. So now I'm standing here, not because I was drawn to him, but because I'm done being invisible. Silence, then a single clap. Then the crowd exploded. Minoru didn't move, not until the applause died down. Backstage, Vivian expected fury, a quiet threat, a reminder of the contract. Instead, when they were finally alone in the hallway, he just stared at her. "You were supposed to follow the talking points," he said evenly. She stepped closer. "I don't perform silence," she said, "and I'm not a damn accessory." His jaw clenched. They stood there, a breath apart. For a moment, neither said it, but both felt it. Something was breaking. That night, the gala was unbearable. A fundraiser in a glass-walled ballroom with chandeliers, champagne, and people who smiled like wolves. Vivian's dress tonight was gold, hand-stitched, a shade they said made her look expensive. Minoru hadn't spoken to her since the panel. He hadn't touched her either, but he'd watched her. From across the room, he'd watched her every move like he couldn't stop himself. The orchestra started playing something soft. Lights dimmed, a signal. They were expected to dance, then kiss, for the campaign, for the cameras. Vivian found herself pulled into his orbit, led to the floor with a smoothness that betrayed how well he'd been trained to pretend. They danced slowly, carefully. "Are you angry?" she asked, her hand on his shoulder. "No," he said. "You stole the narrative. Wasn't yours to begin with." He looked down at her. Really looked. "You look like fire up there," he said quietly. "I was burning." Then the lights shifted. The cue. He leaned in. Vivian didn't move. Not forward, not back. The kiss was soft, just a breath against her lips, but something in it lingered. His hand brushed the back of her neck, like he didn't mean to let go. When he pulled away, the cameras flashed, and yet, the look in his eyes wasn't for them. It was for her, raw, almost afraid. She stepped back, shaken. "If you're going to fake a kiss, don't look at me like it's the end of the world." Minoru didn't respond, because he couldn't lie about what he hadn't meant to feel. Later, Vivian stands in the hotel elevator, heels in hand, dress wrinkled, makeup fading. She looks at herself in the mirror, and for the first time, she doesn't recognize the woman looking back, not because she's lost, but because she's becoming. Vivian had never liked studios. They were too clean, too precise. Music, real music, lived in basements with bad lighting, in subway tunnels where grit turned into gospel, not in rooms padded with foam and silence. But she couldn't lie. The space Minoru had arranged was beautiful. The lights were soft, the walls were mahogany, and in the center, her saxophone sat waiting. The engineer gave her a nod from behind the glass. Vivian took a deep breath, then poured everything out. The song had no title, only ache. They said I was too loud for the stage, so I found the street. They said I was too black for the grant, so I taught kids for free. They said I needed a name behind me, so I wore one I didn't trust. The sax wove through the words like breath caught in a throat. She played like she was praying. And behind the soundproof glass, Minoru Takeda watched, alone, silent. Hands folded behind his back, his gaze didn't leave her. Not even once. His expression didn't flicker, but his throat moved like he was swallowing something sharp. Not attraction, not pity, recognition. Later that week, for PR optics, they were booked for a light cooking segment in the penthouse kitchen. Casual, playful, pre-approved. Vivian rolled up the sleeves of a loose sweater, barefoot on the stone floor, and opened a fridge full of ingredients she didn't buy. "You ever cooked before?" she asked, skeptical. Minoru stood across the island, sleeves rolled, dark watch peeking from his wrist. "I can boil water." She arched a brow. "We're not boiling rice. We're making bulgogi." "Then you'll guide me. You're gonna need divine intervention." The cameras rolled. The crew laughed. The banter was soft, charming, fake. But then she started to hum, a low, haunting tune, the same melody from the studio session, and everything stopped. Minoru froze mid-step, the wooden spoon in his hand slowly lowered. His eyes locked on her. "What is that?" he asked, voice low. She blinked. "Just something I'm working on." He swallowed hard. "It's in a minor, but you bent the seventh." She tilted her head. "You know keys?" Minoru looked down. "I used to play." "Piano?" A pause, then a nod. She stepped toward him. "Let me guess. Classical training, quiet childhood, grand piano in a house no one ever felt safe in." He said nothing. "And you don't play anymore," she continued. "Why?" "Because my father once told me emotions make a man weak, and I played with too much feeling." Vivian's eyes softened. "Your father sounds like someone who couldn't hear music even when it was screaming at him." He looked at her then. Really looked. "And you?" he asked quietly. "Why do you sound like you're bleeding when you sing?" "Because I am." The moment broke before it could become more. Saiko Tanabe, Minoru's ex-fiancée, CEO's daughter, model, heiress, perfection in skin. She arrived at the press conference in a white power suit and stilettos that echoed like gunshots down the marble corridor. Vivian stood beside Minoru, dressed in a minimalist black dress, her curls let loose, no diamonds, just dignity. It should have been another staged PR event, until the questions turned personal. A reporter asked about the unexpected pairing. Before the moderator could deflect, Seiko stepped up, smiling, poised, fake. "I think it's beautiful, really," she said into the mic. "That Minoru found someone to help soften his image. I mean, she's strong, raw, magnetic, the perfect human filter for his bad press." Gasps. Vivian blinked. "Once?" Seiko turned, sugar sweet. "You must be exhausted, darling. All that emotional labor." Minoru stepped forward, lips parting. Vivian held up a hand, then turned, and walked out. He found her in the hotel's rooftop garden. The sun was bleeding into the skyline, painting Seoul gold and gray. Vivian stood by the railing, arms crossed, breathing like she was trying not to cry. "I should have known," she said without turning around. "Women like her always think women like me are someone's pity project." Minoru approached slowly. She was out of line. "She was your fiancé." "Was," he repeated. "Doesn't matter." She spoke with confidence, like she knew you'd never defend me. He exhaled. "I was going to." Vivian finally turned to face him. "That's the problem. You were going to. Always almost. Always restrained. Always ice. But Her voice cracked. "I thought I saw warmth in you. Stupid of me, huh?" Minoru's jaw clenched. "You weren't stupid," he said softly. "No," she said bitterly. "Just hopeful. And I should know better." He took a step closer. "Vivian, don't," she whispered. "If you're about to say something rehearsed, don't." He didn't, because for once, he had nothing to script. Vivian returns to her room, alone. She sits on the floor beside her guitar, hands trembling, and then, with aching fingers, she plays. The song has changed. The chords are messier now, but the pain is clear. It started with rain, nothing dramatic, just a light drizzle tapping against the car windows as they left Seoul behind for a countryside charity appearance, one of Minoru's team's latest attempts at reputation laundering. Vivian had barely spoken since the press conference. Minoru had given her space, too much space, and now, as they curved along a narrow, tree-lined road, she sat by the window in silence. Headphones in, hoodie pulled up, legs crossed. Her fingers tapped idly against her thigh, in rhythm with the song only she could hear. Minoru watched her in the rearview mirror, and then the sky cracked open. By the time the driver pulled the car off the highway, the typhoon was a living thing. Angry winds tearing through the trees, sideways rain smearing the world into water and ash. "We have to stop," the driver said, panicked. "Nearest shelter is an inn 5 minutes ahead." Neither of them argued. 5 minutes later, they stood in the wooden doorway of a quiet countryside inn. No cameras, no press, no stylists or PR interns, just thunder, flickering lanterns, and them. The innkeeper bowed. "We only have one suite. The others were flooded earlier this week." Minoru nodded. "That's fine." Vivian shot him a look. "One bed?" The innkeeper hesitated. "One futon, but it's wide enough for—" "We'll take it," Minoru interrupted. Vivian didn't respond, but her silence said everything. The room was simple. Tatami mats, a couch, low table. The futon had already been made. Vivian stood by the window, watching sheets of rain blur the outside world into gray watercolor. Minoru removed his blazer and loosened his tie. The silence was deafening, until, finally. "So," Vivian said, arms folded, "what now? Small talk? Forced eye contact over barley tea?" He sat on the couch without responding. She turned around. "I don't bite, Takeda. If you've got something to say it." Minoru looked up at her, eyes darker than the sky. "You're angry." "Brilliant deduction. And you should be." She blinked, caught off guard. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "I should have said something when she insulted you. Should have shut it down in front of everyone." "But you didn't." "No," he admitted. "I didn't." Vivian's voice dropped. "Why?" A pause. "Because I was raised to believe showing emotion makes you disposable." Silence again, this time heavier. Minoru stared into the rain. "My father used to say, flaws are for poor people." He didn't mean mistakes. He meant feelings, vulnerability, anything soft, anything that made me human. I was never allowed to cry, never allowed to explain. I was either sharp or nothing. Vivian's heart pulled tight in her chest. "You think being cold makes you strong?" she asked softly. He didn't answer. "You're not broken, Minoru," she said. "You're just hiding under suits that don't fit you." He looked at her slowly. "And what about you?" he asked. "You don't trust anyone, not me, not the cameras, not the world. Why?" She exhaled, hard. Then she sat on the floor across from him. "Because my mother died believing she failed," she said, voice low. "She spent her whole life saving money to open a music school. She had the paperwork, the plan, the building, everything. But no bank would give a black woman a loan without a co-signer. Every door closed. She died owing money to people who only called her when she was late, not when she was drowning." Minoru's face changed, barely but enough. "So no," Vivian whispered. "I don't trust people who smile while stepping on your neck. Not anymore." A long pause stretched between them. Then, he stood. He walked to the kitchenette, filled 2 mugs, returned with hot barley tea. He set one in front of her, then sat back down. Vivian stared at the steam, then took a sip. "Thanks." "You're welcome." The storm didn't stop. Thunder rolled. Wind howled. The lights flickered once, but inside, something else had settled. Not comfort, but presence. Minoru lay down on one end of the futon, still fully clothed, hands folded over his chest like he didn't know what rest looked like. Vivian curled up on the couch, blanket pulled to her chin. Neither of them spoke for a while. Then, in the dark, their hands touched, barely. Just fingers brushing as if by accident. Neither moved, neither spoke, but the silence shifted again, not with tension, not with fear, with peace. Vivian fell asleep to the sound of rain. Minoru was still awake, staring at the ceiling, but their hands remained there, touching, not holding, not performing, just existing, and somehow it's enough. It started with a laugh, grainy footage, a badly angled phone camera, no faces, just voices. She's perfect, just the right kind of angry, more laughter. The race card and the struggle story, we couldn't script it better. She's like a human emotional sponge, another voice chimed in, young, female, smug. Seriously, she makes him look palatable. We owe her a fruit basket or something. Someone muttered, let's keep her busy with panels and press. She doesn't need to know how essential she's become. The laughter grew louder, meaner. And just before the clip ended, a final voice said, Vivian Knight, the best unpaid PR stunt we've ever pulled. It hit the internet at 9:47 a.m. By 10:15, it had 2.1 million views. By 10:43, the hashtags were trending. Hashtag RaceCardGirlfriend, hashtag Vivian deserved better, hashtag Takeda Truth. Vivian stood in her kitchen. The video still looped on her phone, screen dimmed now from inactivity, but her fingers were frozen around it. Her breathing was shallow, wrong. She'd heard every type of insult growing up. Loud, black, ghetto, too smart, too dark, too difficult. But this wasn't name-calling. It was calculated betrayal. It was boardroom evil dressed as business. And it shattered something she hadn't even realized was fragile. Takeda Tower, 27th floor. She didn't knock. The boardroom was full. Sleek suits, hard faces, murmuring voices. A quarterly review in progress, until the door slammed open, and Vivian walked in. Her curls were frizzed from rain. No makeup, no designer styling. Just jeans, a black hoodie, and a fury so sharp it silenced the entire table. Minoru stood immediately. Vivian! No, she snapped. Don't speak. She walked straight to the center of the table. She didn't look at the board. She looked at him, eyes blazing. I was prepared to be used, Minoru. That was the deal. You gave me exposure. I gave you credibility. I knew what it was. She slammed her phone on the table. The video played again, loud, unfiltered. Everyone heard it. The laughter, the words. Human emotional sponge. The best unpaid PR stunt we've ever pulled. The room was frozen. Vivian's voice cracked on the next words. But I wasn't prepared to matter. And now I hate that I ever did. Minoru looked devastated, but she didn't care. You let them parade me like a medal, she said, louder now. You let them undress my dignity and call it branding. And you stood there and said nothing, while they sold my story like a limited edition sympathy token. I didn't know about the video, he said quietly. That's worse, she said, because it means you never asked. You didn't protect me. You protected the image I gave you. Silence. Then she turned to the board. I don't care what deals you're closing, what stocks you're chasing, or how uncomfortable I make this room feel. The contract is over. I'm not your girlfriend. I'm not your buffer, and I am not your redemption arc. She pulled the signed contract from her coat, tore it down the middle, and laid the pieces on the table. Then she turned to Minoru. Tell your people they broke something they can't rebuild. He didn't follow her, didn't beg, didn't chase, because he knew. This wasn't a lover's quarrel. This was an execution, and she had every right to walk away. She was gone before the building remembered how to breathe. By sundown, headlines exploded. Vivian Knight ends contract with Takeda Corp after racist leak. Boardroom backlash. Takeda accused of exploiting Black woman for PR. PR suicide or justice served. Vivian ignored them all. She turned off her phone, deleted the shared calendar, took off the Cartier bracelet someone on his team gave her like it meant something. And when she looked in the mirror that night, mascara still smudged under her eyes, she whispered, "Don't let this break you." Then she cried, not for the contract, not even for him, for herself, for believing it could ever become real. Minoru Takeda didn't sleep. He fired the entire PR division by midnight. He suspended his head of communications, cut 2 board members, issued a formal investigation into the leak. But none of it mattered, because she was gone, not just physically, but in the silence where her voice used to be. Vivian sat alone in a practice studio bathed in moonlight. She opens her case. Her sax rests inside, silent, waiting. She doesn't play. She just stares at it. And in her silence, there is grief. But under that, there is resolve. Because even broken, she's still hers. Vivian had never been more scared. Not when she signed the contract, not when the clip went viral, not even when she tore the deal in half in front of Takeda's board. No, this, sitting in front of her laptop, staring at a blinking cursor, this was terror. Because this wasn't scripted. This wasn't filtered through a PR team. This was her, all her. She clicked record. The camera blinked on. Vivian Knight sat in her worn hoodie with no makeup, no ring light, no corporate backing. Just the rawness of someone who'd survived both exploitation and silence. She inhaled, once, deep. Hey, I'm Vivian Knight. Not a brand, not a campaign, not anyone's girlfriend. Just a Black woman with a dream, a horn, and a story that was never meant to be sold. My mother died trying to open a music school for kids like me. I lost her. I nearly lost myself. But I still have her dream. And this time, I'm building it in my own name. She looked down, then back at the lens, eyes fierce, voice steady. If you want to help, I won't sell you inspiration. I'll give you impact. She clicked post and waited. 2 hours later, the donation started small, $5, $20. A message, for every song we never got to hear from your mother. Then the shares multiplied. Musicians, activists, Black educators, survivors, and soon, strangers who believed. By midnight, it had crossed $200,000. By dawn, it was $500,000. Not because of a billionaire's name, but hers. Minoru watched in silence. The video played on repeat in his office. Once his father's office, now a cage of glass and ghosts. Vivian didn't ask for attention. She didn't cry on cue. She didn't name drop. She simply stood in truth, and people showed up. He should have felt proud. He felt wrecked, because while she rose, he was being told, again, what power required. His father called that morning, voice clipped, cold. We've secured interest from 4 American firms, but to finalize the merger, we'll need a public statement. Full disassociation from the girl. Silence about the video. Her name is Vivian, Minoru said flatly. You don't owe her anything. I owe myself more than this. A pause. You walk away from this merger, you'll lose the chair. The board won't protect you. Minoru stared out at the city, the empire he'd built brick by soul-crushing brick. And in that silence, he remembered her words. You're not broken. You're just hiding under suits that don't fit you. He made the call. No press team, no strategy. He walked into the press conference alone, in a black suit with no tie and a face stripped of the usual steel. Reporters flooded the lobby, flashes, noise. Then he stepped up to the podium. Effective today, I am resigning as CEO of Takeda Global. Not because I lost control, but because I found something worth more than control. Her name is Vivian Knight, and this company treated her like a tool. But she's not a tool. She's a voice, a force. She reminded me of something I forgot. Power isn't having the mic. It's choosing who you protect when the world tells you to stay silent. He stepped back. No questions, no spin, just walked out and let the empire burn behind him. Vivian saw the broadcast from her phone, on a bench outside her school's construction site. She didn't cry. She didn't smile either. She just sat there, clutching her coat tighter, because the man who'd once treated her like strategy had finally chosen truth, and he'd done it without asking for anything in return. 2 days later, Vivian stood in the half-finished music school. The walls echo with promise. Her saxophone rests beside her. She opens her notebook, writes her name at the top, Vivian Knight. Not as someone's girlfriend, not as someone's storyline, but as herself. And this time, she'll be the headline. Months later, the ribbon-cutting ceremony was small. Vivian hadn't wanted cameras, no press, no influencers or trending hashtags. Just her students, a few parents, her late mother's photo resting on the central piano, and the sound of laughter echoing in a space once built out of grief. The building wasn't perfect, still smelled faintly of paint, the floors creaked, and the back classroom had no heat. But it was real, and it had her name etched in gold on the entryway plaque, the Knight School of Music and Arts. No Takeda, no corporate sponsor, just Vivian. Finally, she gave tours all morning, guiding students with soft smiles and misted eyes. Each room carried a different memory of the dream her mother once whispered into the walls of their Detroit apartment. Now, it lived. And then, mid-afternoon, while she helped a student tune a violin, someone quietly entered the lobby. She didn't notice at first, but a pause settled in the air. A hush. And when she turned, Minoru Takeda stood just beyond the doorway in a slate gray coat, a black scarf tucked neatly at his collar. No cameras, no press team, no fanfare, just him, and in his hand, an envelope. Vivian walked to him slowly, not sure what she felt. Her heart was somewhere between clenched and undone. He said nothing, didn't try to explain, didn't try to hold her. He simply offered her the envelope. She took it, fingers brushing his briefly. "Congratulations," he said quietly. She searched his face, not cold, not rehearsed, just tired, and something else, something tender. He nodded once, stepped back, then left, without waiting for a reply. She didn't open the envelope until evening. The students had gone home. The staff had locked up. The sky outside had turned a violet. She sat on the bench in the main hall, the very center of the school, and held the envelope like it might shatter. Inside was a torn sheet, the original contract, ripped straight down the center. No NDA, no payment clause, no legal disclaimers, just a line through every bullet point that had once turned her into a business transaction, and folded within it, a handwritten note. No signature, just -M. She unfolded it. "If I never hear your music again, please let me remember the sound that saved me. You don't owe me forgiveness, but I owe you truth. I should have protected you. I should have believed in you before the world told me to. I stepped into your fire thinking I could control it, but all you ever did was offer me warmth. You were never mine, but I was always yours, Minoru." Vivian didn't sob. She just closed the note slowly, pressed it to her chest, and breathed like someone remembering how to feel again. For months, she had not heard from him, but this said everything. She didn't call, didn't text, didn't post the letter online. because it wasn't for the world. It was for her, and some things deserve to be held, not shared. That night, Vivian sat alone in the music hall, the moonlight pouring through the high windows. She played one song on her saxophone, quiet, aching, beautiful. Not for the students, not for the donors, not even for her mother. She played it for the man who didn't ask to be forgiven. And maybe that's why she couldn't forget him. The night school of music was full, not packed, not overproduced, but full of students who'd learned to believe in their sound, full of families who'd walked through doors built on dreams, full of a community that never stopped showing up for her. Vivian adjusted the mic stand with steady hands and a heart that felt anything but. The lights dimmed. The final recital of the night was hers, not because she needed to impress anyone, not because she needed to prove herself, but because this was how she healed. She stepped up to the stage, holding her saxophone close. A hush fell over the room, and without introduction, without apology, she began to play. It wasn't a song you could clap to. There was no catchy hook, no dramatic crescendo. It was something quieter, something older, something true. The kind of sound that came from a cracked soul slowly, painfully sealing itself back together. Every note was an echo of what she lost. Her mother, her name, her peace. And every silence between notes, that was him, Minoru Takeda, the ghost of him, the grief of him, the guilt of him, and somewhere in the middle, the love of him. He was in the back, dressed simply in black, seated in the shadows. No cameras, no staff, no curated image, just him, sitting still, listening like it hurt. She didn't look at him, not while she played, because she needed this moment to be hers. And when the final note fell, soft, imperfect, holy, the room exhaled, then applauded, loud, real, rising to their feet. Vivian bowed once and walked off the stage, her steps deliberate, her breath shallow. She moved through the center aisle, not smiling, not floating. She moved like a woman with something left to say. And when she reached him, she stopped, right there, in the middle of everything. Minoru stood, eyes locked. No script, no shield, just the man who lost everything and still showed up. Vivian stared at him, her voice low, controlled, but breaking with weight. "You started this with a lie." He didn't flinch. She stepped closer. "But I'll end it with a choice." A silence passed. Then he whispered, "What do you choose?" Her eyes didn't leave his, not this time. You, not the CEO, not the scandal, not the silence, just the man who gave up everything when he didn't have to. Minoru's breath caught, barely. His hands trembled, slightly. And before he could speak, she reached for him and kissed him. No cue, no camera, no agenda, just lips to lips, soul to soul. A breath shared between two people who had learned how to bleed honestly. He didn't pull her closer like a conqueror. He held her like a confession. And when she finally broke the kiss, she whispered, "You didn't save me, but you stopped letting them break me. That's enough." They step outside together. They walk through the streetlight glow, fingers brushing once, then intertwining. No headlines, no scandal, no performance. Just truth. And for the first time, Vivian Knight chooses a man. Not because he proved the world wrong, but because he finally stopped pretending to be anything but hers. The music hall was glowing, not with spotlights or chandeliers, but with lanterns. dozens of them, hanging from the beams and floating along the garden path just beyond the open doors. There were no reporters, no velvet ropes, no luxury car arrivals or designer labels. Just a few rows of folding chairs, students dressed in pressed shirts and dresses they'd outgrow by next season, and one black grand piano at the center of it all, polished to reflect the lights above it. Vivian stood in front of it, barefoot. She wore no veil, only a soft, champagne-colored dress that whispered around her ankles like a memory. Her curls were pinned loosely, wild and elegant, a few strands falling against her cheek. A gold cuff wrapped her arm. No diamonds, just a nod to her mother's style. And in her hand, a crumpled letter, the one he once tucked into her guitar case. She read it again as if for the first time, then folded it slowly and turned. Minoru stood at the back of the room, holding a bouquet of fresh calla lilies. He wasn't in a tux, just a black linen suit, his shirt collar open, his hair swept back. No mask, no armor, just Minoru, the man who gave up his name before she even thought of taking it. Their eyes locked, and he walked toward her, each step as reverent as prayer. When he reached her, he handed her the lilies. "There are 1,000 vows I could make," he said quietly, "but none more honest than this. I love you in your quiet, and I love you in your fire. I love the you I met, and the you I never deserved." Vivian's voice trembled. "You don't owe me promises. You already paid the price. I just want you to stay, not as a CEO, not as a hero, just as the man who was on my side." They didn't exchange rings. They exchanged music. Vivian sat at the piano. Minoru stepped to the mic. He didn't sing. He just read a short poem, one he wrote. "If you were silence, I would unlearn noise. If you were chaos, I would rest in your storm. But you are melody, and I am yours." She smiled through her tears. "You still write like you don't expect anyone to read it." "I only ever wanted you to read it," he said. They kissed under the lanterns, and behind them, the students, her students, clapped and whooped and cheered, because love like this was never performative. It was earned, and it would endure. Later that night, alone in the music hall, Vivian plays a song. Minoru beside her on a cushion, his head resting in her shoulder as she hums. Their hands are laced, not for the world, not for legacy, just for them. Vivian Takeda Knight, wife, musician, daughter, fire, free. The end.